On the outer edges of the Xerion system, on a planet bathed in pale blue light and surrounded by floating crystal formations, lived a being that every citizen of Xerion feared. His name was Varkon. Standing taller than the largest Clith soldier, and with muscles that rippled under scales that shimmered in the sunlight, he was the perfect image of strength and power. Yet that very power, combined with his sharp features and glowing amber eyes, made him a pariah. People whispered about him in the streets. Children were warned not to approach the edges of the cities where he walked, and merchants quietly refused him service. Varkon had everything one could imagine for survival: speed, strength, and resilience. But he had nothing else. No friends, no allies, no trust. Despite his intimidating appearance, Varkon was not cruel. He spent most of his days wandering the outskirts of cities and villages, helping wherever he could. If a builder needed help moving heavy stones, he would lift them without complaint. If a stranded merchant required a hand, Varkon would quietly assist, leaving before anyone could see him. The problem was that no one saw his kindness. All they saw was the monster-like exterior. It made him sad sometimes, though he rarely let anyone notice. His life was quiet, lonely, and predictable, and he had grown used to it over the years. One morning, as the twin suns rose over jagged mountains and cast long shadows across the valleys, a small shuttle descended from the sky. It carried a human, a rare sight on Xerion. Humans were known across galaxies as curious, daring, and often unpredictable. Many species feared them, though some respected them for their ingenuity. The human stepping out of the shuttle was Captain Elena Ward, an ambassador with a reputation for diplomacy, courage, and kindness. She had been sent to negotiate a trade agreement and establish stronger ties between the human colonies and the Clith cities. Varkon first saw her from a distance. She walked with confidence, her movements careful but assured, and her eyes scanned the terrain with a mixture of curiosity and intelligence. Unlike most Clith, she did not flinch or whisper when she noticed him. Her gaze met his, and instead of fear, there was interest. This small difference made Varkon pause. He was not used to someone looking at him and seeing more than his size or appearance. Most saw a weapon. She seemed to see a being capable of thought and feeling. For days, Elena worked with the council and traders in the cities. Varkon observed from the outskirts, unseen but attentive. He watched her speak to groups of aliens who had long dismissed him. She asked questions about history, culture, and the people, showing respect and patience that was uncommon. Occasionally, she glanced toward the edge of the crowd, almost as if sensing Varkon's presence. And each time, Varkon felt a strange warmth, a feeling he had not experienced in decades: curiosity and hope. One afternoon, a small incident brought them together. A young Clith child had wandered too far from the city limits and was trapped on a narrow ledge above a deep chasm. The child screamed, and the sound echoed through the valley. Guards and citizens hesitated, unsure if they could reach the child safely. Varkon, seeing the danger, did not hesitate. He sprinted across the rocky terrain, leaping over gaps and scaling cliffs with ease. With a single motion, he lifted the child from the ledge and placed him safely on solid ground. The crowd gasped and stepped back, fear replacing relief for a moment. The child's parents, however, ran forward and hugged their child tightly, and then reluctantly turned to look at Varkon. Their eyes were wide with awe and fear. Varkon simply nodded and turned to leave, not wanting to draw more attention. It was then that Elena approached him. She walked calmly through the crowd, her hands raised slightly in peace, and stopped a few feet from him. "You saved him," she said softly. Her voice was clear, steady, and without judgment. "That was brave. Thank you." Varkon paused. No one had ever spoken to him like this before. They either ignored him, shouted at him, or ran away in terror. Her words did not carry fear or anger. They carried recognition. Recognition of an act of kindness, not just strength. "I didn't mean to," Varkon said, his voice low and rough. "It was just necessary." Elena smiled faintly. "Necessity often shows who we really are. You didn't have to do it, yet you did. That matters. Varkon felt a strange sensation, like a small spark of light in the dark emptiness he had grown accustomed to. He wanted to say more, but words felt heavy and strange in his throat. Instead, he nodded and walked back toward the rocky hills where he lived. That night, Varkon could not sleep. For the first time in decades, he thought about someone else seeing him differently. Someone seeing not a monster, but a being with choices, with heart, with purpose. He had seen fear, yes, in the eyes of others, but never understanding or respect. Elena had changed that, and even from a distance, he felt it. Over the next several days, Varkon found himself watching her from afar. She spoke to officials, visited communities, and worked tirelessly to learn about the Clith and their world. She treated everyone with respect, even those who feared her or misunderstood her. Each time he saw her interact with others, he learned something new, not just about humans, but about himself. He realized that perhaps he too could be more than what the world believed. Then one day, a minor crisis struck the trade center where Elena was working. A transport ship had malfunctioned and blocked the main trading route. Officials panicked, unsure how to move the massive vessel without causing damage or delays. Elena noticed the problem and immediately considered practical solutions, but she realized that she would need strength beyond what the humans or most Clith could provide. Varkon, who had been observing, stepped forward silently. He lifted the ship with ease, moving it enough to clear the path while careful to avoid harm. The crowd watching gasped, but instead of fleeing, many stared in disbelief and slowly began to applaud. Elena looked at him, her eyes shining with admiration. "You have incredible strength," she said. "But more than that, you have the courage to use it wisely. That's rare." Varkon's heart pounded. For the first time, he felt recognized for who he truly was, not feared for what he appeared to be. He realized that this human, small and seemingly fragile compared to him, had the ability to see past appearances and inspire trust. The following days were a turning point. Varkon found himself walking into the city more often, staying longer around the humans and Clith who worked with Elena. Slowly, cautiously, some of the Clith began to accept him. Children no longer ran away, traders spoke politely, and a few elders nodded in acknowledgement. Fear still lingered, but it was being replaced by curiosity, respect, and perhaps even hope. Elena, noticing Varkon's growing confidence, spoke to him one evening while the twin suns set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. "You have more influence than you know," she said. "People fear what they do not understand. If you show them who you really are, they will follow." Varkon looked at her, thinking deeply. He had spent years alone, misunderstood, and rejected. And yet here was someone who believed in him, not for power, not for fear, but for the potential inside him. He nodded slowly, a small spark of determination igniting within him. Perhaps this was the beginning of something new. Perhaps with Elena's guidance he could change not only his life, but the lives of those who had feared him for so long. As night fell and the stars began to shimmer over Xyrian, Varkon stood atop a rocky hill looking down at the city. For the first time in his life, he felt a strange warmth, not just of hope, but of possibility. He realized that fear had defined him for too long, but it did not have to define his future. And at the heart of this realization was the human who had dared to see beyond the monstrous exterior and find the being within. It was the beginning of a journey that would challenge every belief he held, that would test courage, compassion, and strength in ways he could not yet imagine. And for the first time, Varkon felt seen. The days passed and the city of Xyrian slowly began to buzz with unusual excitement. Varkon, the once feared outcast, had become an unexpected presence in the heart of the human delegation. He spent hours observing, listening, and occasionally helping when something needed strength or precision that only he could provide. Still, many Clith remained wary. Fear is a slow companion, and trust is earned one act at a time. Captain Elena Ward noticed this. She'd been trained to work in tense situations, to calm crowds, and to inspire cooperation. Yet she understood better than anyone that Varkon's biggest challenge would not be the rogue elements outside the city, or the dangerous terrain of Zirion, it would be changing hearts. She had seen hints of kindness and intelligence in him, but she also knew that the Clith's prejudice ran deep. People feared strength they did not understand. One morning, as the twin suns rose over the city, casting pale blue light over the towers and markets, a sudden alarm rang across the trade district. A group of rogue Clith, dissatisfied with the ongoing negotiations and suspicious of human influence, had decided to sabotage the city's main trade hub. Their goal was to show the council that humans could not be trusted, and to prove that Varkon's involvement was a mistake. They carried small but dangerous machines designed to block transport routes and create panic. Varkon was nearby, observing Elena speaking with a group of city elders. He noticed the tension immediately. His instincts flared. Danger, however subtle, made his senses sharpen. He saw the small machines being placed near the loading docks and the guards hesitating, unsure how to respond without escalating the situation. Varkon stepped forward, his shadow stretching over the plaza, drawing curious and fearful glances. Elena noticed him. She did not panic, though a ripple of concern crossed her face. "Varkon," she called calmly, "we need your help." He nodded. Words were not needed between them. They had developed a silent understanding over the past week. He moved swiftly but carefully, approaching the machines. His size and strength allowed him to lift and disable them before they could cause harm, all without alarming the bystanders or triggering the devices. The crowd gasped, unsure whether to be amazed or terrified. Varkon's movements were precise, almost graceful despite his bulk. Elena's calm voice rose above the murmurs. "Look closely," she said. "He is not here to harm us. He is protecting us." It was a small moment, but in that instant some of the onlookers felt their fear shift. For the first time, they saw Varkon as a protector rather than a threat. He worked silently, removing obstacles, and even helped some of the frightened merchants and guards to safety. When the danger had passed, he stepped back and waited, letting others approach him if they dared. Elena was the first. "You handled that perfectly," she said. Her tone was warm, encouraging, and free from judgment. "Your strength can be a force for good." "It already is." Varkon lowered his head slightly. "I did what needed to be done," he said simply. "It felt right." "Yes," Elena replied, smiling. "That is exactly what makes a difference. Doing what is right even when others doubt you. That is courage." For the first time, Varkon realized that bravery did not only come from strength or fearlessness. It came from choice, from the willingness to act for the benefit of others even when the world misunderstood you. Over the next few days, the city council began discussing the situation. The rogue faction had been captured without major violence, largely due to Elena's calm negotiation and Varkon's careful intervention. Some council members who had long feared him began to speak differently. They acknowledged that he had acted not for himself, but for the safety and stability of the city. A few brave merchants even thanked him personally, their words cautious but genuine. Yet not all were convinced. Some elders whispered that fear was necessary to maintain order. Strength unchecked could easily become dangerous. Varkon heard these murmurs, though he tried to ignore them. Still, it reminded him that acceptance would not come easily. It would take more than one act to change decades of prejudice. Elena, understanding the delicate balance, invited Varkon to accompany her on several visits to communities outside the main city. They traveled together through villages, small settlements, and trade posts, encountering Clith who had never seen a human before. At first, many people froze or backed away at the sight of Varkon. Yet when he worked alongside Elena to solve small problems, lifting heavy cargo, repairing broken machinery, or helping farmers build shelters, the fear gradually transformed into curiosity, and curiosity slowly into respect. One evening, while they were traveling along a winding canyon path, a minor accident occurred. A bridge, old and poorly maintained, threatened to collapse as they crossed. Elena noticed it in time and stopped, but several settlers had already begun to panic. Varkon, seeing the danger, stepped forward. Carefully, he held the bridge steady with his massive arms while helping each person cross safely. His movements were deliberate, showing not just strength but control and care. When the last settler was safe, Elena looked at him, her eyes reflecting the last rays of the twin suns. "See," she said softly, "when you use your power wisely, people begin to trust, not because they are forced, but because they know you care." Varkon nodded, a slow but steady realization spreading through him. His life of isolation had been built on fear of others and their fear of him. Perhaps with careful actions and patience he could begin to change that perception. Perhaps he could belong. Their journey continued, and word of Varkan's actions began to spread. Traders spoke of the giant who saves without harm. Children whispered about the gentle protector, and some elders began to reconsider their opinions. It was a small ripple, but it carried potential for a larger wave. However, not all challenges were simple. The rogue faction of Clith, though weakened, had not disappeared entirely. They watched from the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to prove that Varkan's growing influence was a mistake. One night, while Varkan and Elena rested at a remote village, scouts reported unusual activity near the main trade route. Machines had been moved into position, ready to block passage and create confusion once again. Varkan did not hesitate. This time he did not act alone. Elena coordinated the villagers, giving clear instructions while Varkan carefully removed the devices and led the settlers to safety. The combination of his strength and her leadership worked seamlessly. For the first time, Varkan realized that teamwork, trust, and courage could overcome fear without the need for violence. By the time the threat was neutralized, the villagers were no longer staring at him in terror. They nodded respectfully, whispered words of thanks, and even offered small gifts, signs of appreciation and trust that Varkan had never experienced before. Elena placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "This is what happens when fear is replaced with understanding. People see who you truly are, not what they imagined." Varkan felt a new sensation rising within him. It was not power, nor anger, nor fear, it was connection. For the first time in his long life, he felt a sense of purpose beyond survival. He realized that his strength, when guided by wisdom and compassion, could inspire others. He was no longer just a feared outcast. He was becoming a symbol of hope and courage. That night, as he watched the twin suns dip below the horizon and the stars of Zirion begin to twinkle, Varkan reflected on the human who had changed everything. Elena had seen him not as a monster, but as a being capable of greatness. She had shown him the value of choice, the power of compassion, and the possibility of acceptance. It was a lesson he would carry forward, one careful act at a time, until perhaps one day, fear would be replaced entirely with respect and trust. Varkan knew that challenges lay ahead. Prejudice, doubt, and the rogue faction would not disappear overnight. But for the first time, he faced the future with hope rather than dread. He understood that the path to acceptance was slow, but with patience, courage, and guidance, he could help change not only his own life, but the hearts of those around him. Elena smiled as she watched him from the campfire. "You're doing more than you realize," she said. "And this is only the beginning." Varkan looked at her and nodded. "Then I will continue. For them, for you, for myself." As the night deepened and the cool winds of Zirion whispered through the canyon, Varkan felt a new chapter of his life begin. One that promised connection, purpose, and the chance to be seen for who he truly was, not a monster, not a weapon, but a being capable of inspiring trust and hope. And so, under the twin moons of Zirion, the once feared outcast took his first steps toward becoming a hero. Not through fear, but through courage, compassion, and the guidance of a human who believed in him. The days grew longer, and Varkan's presence in the cities and villages of Zirion became increasingly noticed. His actions, once feared, were slowly reshaping the opinions of many Clith. Children began to wave when he passed. Merchants called out greetings, and even some of the council members nodded in respect when he entered the chambers. Yet despite these small victories, Varkan knew that true acceptance was still far from reach. There were those who watched silently, their skepticism simmering beneath polite smiles. Elena had been observing these changes closely. She knew that moments of kindness alone would not be enough to alter deep-rooted fears. The Clith needed to witness courage, wisdom, and integrity in the face of real challenges. And soon an opportunity arrived, though not in a form anyone could have predicted. A distant signal from one of Zirion's outlying research stations had gone dark. These stations were critical for monitoring weather patterns, mining activity, and communication channels. The council feared the worst, a possible malfunction or worse, sabotage by hostile elements who still resisted peace and cooperation. Elena immediately proposed that she and Varkan travel to the station to investigate. The journey was perilous. The route took them across jagged cliffs, through dense forests where visibility was low, and across rivers swollen with melted ice from the twin suns' rays. Varkan's strength and agility proved invaluable. He carried heavy equipment over unstable bridges, helped Elena navigate difficult terrain, and cleared obstacles that would have delayed or endangered any other travelers. Yet even with his abilities, the human and Clith scouts accompanying them could not ignore the danger of the path. When they reached the station, the scene was one of quiet destruction. Machinery lay scattered, communications arrays were partially collapsed, and small fires burned along the outer structures. It was clear that the station had been targeted, though fortunately no lives had been lost. Elena assessed the situation quickly. "This is more than an accident," she said. "Someone wanted to create fear to slow our progress." Varkan stepped forward. "Then we stop them. We fix this. We show that fear does not win." His voice carried a strength and calm that few could resist. Even the Clith engineers at the station looked at him with a mixture of awe and trust. Over the next hours, Varkan and Elena worked side by side with the engineers. Varkan lifted fallen beams, moved heavy equipment into place, and stabilized structures that threatened to collapse. He did not rush and he did not panic. His careful strength allowed the repairs to progress quickly and safely. Elena coordinated communications with the city council, relaying updates and requesting additional support where needed. The combined effort of human ingenuity and Varkan's power restored the station faster than anyone had expected. But it was not just physical labor that mattered. When the engineers hesitated or doubted their ability to repair damaged systems, Varkan spoke words of encouragement. His voice, usually low and commanding, softened with sincerity. "We can do this," he said. "Fear does not help. We are stronger when we work together." By the time the station was fully operational again, word had already reached nearby settlements. People spoke of the giant who had worked tirelessly not for glory, but to protect and rebuild. They began to understand that strength alone was not what made Varkan remarkable. It was his careful judgment, his compassion, and his willingness to act for the benefit of others. Elena watched him quietly. "They are beginning to see," she said. "But there is still more to do. You will need to show them not just your strength, but your wisdom, your leadership, and your heart." Varkan nodded. He understood. His life had been defined by fear for so long, and now, for the first time, he had a chance to define himself by courage, compassion, and purpose. The next challenge came sooner than expected. The council had summoned Varkan to a ceremonial trial, a tradition for those who wished to gain the respect and trust of the Clith people. The trial was designed to test courage, intelligence, and decision-making under pressure. Success would earn Varkan recognition and admiration. Failure would reinforce the fears of those still wary of him. Varkan accepted the challenge, not out of pride, but because he knew it was necessary. Elena accompanied him, offering advice and moral support, but allowing him to face the trial on his own terms. As they approached the ceremonial grounds, Varkan noticed the faces in the crowd. Some were fearful, some curious, and some openly doubtful. Yet he also saw glimmers of hope. Children watching with wide eyes, elders nodding cautiously, and traders whispering their admiration. The trial began with tests of physical endurance. Varkan navigated obstacle courses designed to challenge strength, agility, and problem-solving skills. Unlike others who had faced these trials, Varkan did not rely solely on brute force. He observed, analyzed, and adjusted his approach, using intelligence and strategy to overcome each challenge. The crowd began to murmur in surprise. Some Clith had never seen such controlled power. Some began to question the fears they had carried for generations. Next came tests of leadership. Varkan was placed in a simulated scenario where he needed to organize a group of Clith and human participants to complete a complex task, retrieving essential resources from a dangerous environment. He listened to suggestions, delegated tasks according to skill, and motivated the group with encouragement rather than fear. His calm and measured approach led to success. Participants worked together efficiently, and the observers began to see a new side of the once feared giant: wisdom and empathy in action. The final test was a challenge of decision-making under pressure. A simulation of a natural disaster was created, and Varkan needed to guide a group of civilians to safety. There were multiple paths, each with risks and benefits. Many expected him to choose the path of least resistance or to act without thought, relying on sheer strength. But Varkon considered the options carefully, prioritized safety, and took calculated risks to ensure that all participants remained unharmed. By the end of the trial, the council members were astonished. Varkon had not only succeeded but had demonstrated qualities far beyond physical power. Courage, intelligence, compassion, and leadership all were evident in his actions. The crowd, initially skeptical and fearful, erupted into applause. Children cheered, traders nodded in approval, and even some of the elders who had doubted him looked on with newfound respect. Elena stepped forward, her eyes meeting his with pride. "This is what I saw all along," she said softly. "You are more than what they feared. You are a being capable of inspiring trust and hope." Varkon lowered his head, feeling a strange warmth rise within him. It was not just pride. It was connection. For the first time, he felt that his life had purpose beyond solitude and fear. He realized that acceptance was not just about proving strength. It was about showing the world who he truly was, one careful action at a time. As the trial concluded, the council formally acknowledged Varkon's contributions. He was no longer just a figure of fear. He was recognized as a protector and leader. His journey was far from over, but the path ahead was brighter than he had ever imagined. That evening, as he and Elena walked through the city, the streets filled with soft chatter and warm smiles, Varkon noticed something remarkable. People were no longer running at his approach or whispering behind his back. Instead, they observed him with curiosity, respect, and in some cases, admiration. The change was slow but tangible. Elena turned to him, her expression serious but kind. "You have taken the first steps," she said. "Now comes the harder part, showing that your actions are consistent, that trust can grow, and that courage and kindness can lead to lasting change." Varkon nodded. He understood that the challenge was ongoing. Change, he realized, required patience, perseverance, and humility. But he was no longer alone. With Elena by his side and with each act of courage and compassion, he could continue to reshape the hearts and minds of the Clith people. As night fell over Zirion, the twin moons reflecting off the crystal formations, Varkon stood atop a hill overlooking the city. The wind carried the sounds of life, laughter, conversation, and the occasional cheer from children who had once been afraid of him. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment. For the first time, he was not defined by fear, nor limited by the doubts of others. He was becoming a symbol of hope, courage, and compassion. Elena joined him, placing a hand on his scaled shoulder. "The journey is far from over," she said, "but you have proven that one being, guided by wisdom and heart, can change the world around them." Varkon looked at the city, the people, and the stars above. He knew that the trials ahead would test him further, that there would be setbacks, doubts, and new dangers. But for the first time, he faced the future not with fear or hesitation, but with determination and purpose. And so, under the glow of Zirion's twin moons, the once feared outcast embraced the path of a protector, a leader, and a symbol of hope. The journey was only beginning. But with courage, intelligence, and compassion, he could inspire others to look beyond fear and see the strength and goodness that lay within. Varkon had changed, and slowly, the world around him was beginning to change as well. Varkon stood at the edge of the city, gazing at the horizon as the twin suns rose over the mountains. The journey that had begun with fear, solitude, and misunderstanding was now approaching a turning point. The trial he had passed, the small acts of courage, and the guidance of Captain Elena Ward had changed how many Clith saw him. Yet he knew that true transformation would require more than demonstrations of strength and kindness. It would demand leadership, wisdom, and unwavering patience. A council meeting had been called. This was no ordinary assembly. It was a gathering of the highest-ranking elders, influential leaders, and key citizens from across Zirion. The topic was clear. Could the being once feared by all now be a force for unity and hope? The elders had prepared a final test, not of strength, not of courage, but of judgment, strategy, and heart. It was designed to challenge the very qualities that would determine whether Varkon could truly inspire trust. Elena walked beside him, her calm presence reassuring. "Remember," she said softly, "your past does not define you. Your choices do. Lead with what you have learned, and the rest will follow." The challenge was revealed in the Grand Hall. A simulation had been set up, recreating a natural disaster scenario. A powerful storm had struck one of the outer cities. damaging structures, blocking roads, and leaving citizens trapped in dangerous areas. Varkon's task was to guide rescue teams, coordinate evacuation efforts, and make decisions that would prioritize safety and efficiency. Every action, every choice would be observed by the council and citizens alike. As he surveyed the simulated disaster, Varkon felt the weight of responsibility more acutely than ever. He remembered the countless years of isolation, the fear and mistrust that had defined his existence, but he also remembered Elena's words, the lessons he had learned during their journey, and the trust that had slowly grown among the Clith people. He drew a deep breath and stepped forward. He began by assessing the situation carefully. Paths were blocked, some buildings were unstable, and several individuals needed immediate assistance. He delegated tasks based on the strengths of each team member, ensuring that no one was in unnecessary danger. With precise instructions and steady guidance, he led the teams through the simulation with calm determination. When unexpected obstacles appeared, a collapsing bridge, a blocked tunnel, and simulated fires, Varkon did not panic. Instead, he analyzed each situation and acted decisively. He used his strength where it was needed, carefully moved debris, and ensured that everyone was safe before proceeding. He encouraged the teams continuously, reminding them that fear would only slow progress and that calm, thoughtful action was the key to success. The council members watched intently. Some were impressed by his ability to combine strength with wisdom, courage with compassion. Others, who had been skeptical for decades, found themselves reconsidering what they had believed about the once feared outcast. The citizens observing from the galleries began to cheer quietly, their whispers growing into a chorus of admiration. Children who had once hidden at the sight of Varkon now stared openly with awe. Hours passed and the simulation came to an end. Every individual had been guided to safety. The obstacles had been overcome and the efficiency of the operation exceeded expectations. Varkon stood amidst the teams, weary but composed, his eyes scanning the room for the reaction of the council. The silence that followed was thick, tense, and anticipatory. Then slowly the council chair stepped forward. "Varkon," the elder said, voice steady but filled with warmth, "you have shown us qualities that few possess. Strength, yes, but also wisdom. Courage, yes, but also compassion. You have guided others with care, thoughtfulness, and patience. Today we see not a monster to fear, but a leader to respect." A wave of murmurs swept through the hall, followed by applause. Citizens, elders, and council members alike began to cheer. Varkon felt a deep, unfamiliar warmth rise within him. It was the first time he truly understood what it meant to be seen for who he truly was. Not a weapon, not a figure of fear, but a being capable of inspiring hope, courage, and unity. Elena approached him, her eyes shining with pride. "You have done more than prove yourself," she said softly. "You have changed hearts. You have shown them that fear is only a barrier until understanding and trust take its place." Varkon lowered his head, feeling a mixture of humility and gratitude. For decades he had wandered in solitude, misunderstood by everyone around him. Now in a single day he had begun to see the fruits of patience, courage, and compassion. The Clith who had once feared him were now cheering his name, inspired not by his power alone, but by his choices. Over the next several days, the transformation continued. Varkon became a symbol of hope across Zirion. Villages and cities invited him to advise on infrastructure, safety, and community projects. Merchants sought his guidance for problem solving, and children ran to greet him with laughter instead of hiding in fear. Even the skeptics who had whispered doubts for years began to acknowledge his value openly. Varkon worked tirelessly, not for praise or recognition, but because he finally understood the true power of choice. Strength alone could not inspire loyalty or respect. Only wisdom, compassion, and consistent action could earn the trust of others. He guided teams in construction projects, helped organize community events, and mediated disputes with fairness and patience. Every act, no matter how small, reinforced the new perception of him among the people. One evening, as the twin suns dipped behind the mountains and painted the sky with golden and violet hues, Varkon and Elena walked through a quiet city street. Children played along the paths, merchants packed up their stalls with smiles, and elders nodded respectfully as they passed. For the first time, the city felt safe and warm, a place where fear no longer ruled hearts. Elena looked at Varkon, her expression gentle. "You've come a long way," she said. Do you realize what you've done? Not just for yourself, but for all of Zirian. You've shown them that trust, courage, and understanding can overcome fear. That is a lesson that will last for generations. Varkon smiled faintly, the scales along his jaw catching the fading sunlight. I could not have done it without you, he admitted. You saw me when no one else did. You showed me that strength without care is nothing and that fear can be replaced with hope. Elena shook her head. No, you did this yourself. I only helped you see what you already had inside. Varkon nodded thoughtfully. He realized she was right. All along, the potential had been within him, the ability to act with courage, compassion, and wisdom. Elena had only guided him to recognize it. Now it was his choices, repeated over time, that had changed the world around him. Word of Varkon's transformation spread beyond the city, reaching neighboring settlements, distant trade hubs, and even the outer colonies of Zirian. People who had once whispered his name with fear now spoke it with admiration and respect. The being feared by all and loved by none had become a symbol of hope and unity, a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and that courage and compassion were far more powerful than intimidation or brute strength. Varkon's journey was far from over. Challenges would continue to arise as they always did, but he now faced them with confidence, patience, and a sense of purpose he had never known. He understood that leadership was not about being feared, but about inspiring trust. He understood that true strength came from choice, and that real courage was guided by compassion. As night fell over Zirian, the twin moons reflecting in the crystalline formations, Varkon stood atop a hill overlooking the city. He watched families laugh, children play, and citizens move through their lives with a new sense of security. For the first time in decades, he felt at peace. He was no longer alone. He was no longer defined by fear. He was part of a community, a symbol of hope, and a living proof that even the most feared can become loved and respected. Elena joined him silently, standing beside him as they gazed at the city. This is only the beginning, she said softly. Your story will inspire others not just here but across the stars. You've proven what humans and Clith together can achieve when they look beyond fear and see the potential within. Varkon smiled, the glow of the twin moons reflecting in his amber eyes. Then I will continue, he said quietly. For them, for this world, for the chance to make every choice count, and to show that fear is never the answer. Under the stars and moons of Zirion, the once feared outcast finally felt the warmth of acceptance and the power of purpose. He had transformed from a figure of terror into a beacon of hope. And in doing so, he had not only changed the world around him, but he had also discovered who he truly was. And in that moment, as the city below buzzed with life and laughter, Varkon understood a profound truth. Strength without heart is empty. Fear without understanding is useless. But courage guided by compassion can change everything. The journey had begun with fear, but it ended with hope. And for Varkon, for Elena, and for all of Zirian, that hope would continue to grow, stronger with every choice, every act of kindness, and every moment of courage.